What's going on everyone? Welcome to the third tutorial in the series. In this tutorial, we are going to look at list comprehensions. So list comprehensions are an easy and fast way to build lists. So let's get started and look at some examples for list comprehensions so it will be easier to understand. Now let's say we want to build a list of 20 numbers, and to do that we can use a for loop. So first we need an empty list, and then we can use for I in range. So instead of 20 numbers, let's do 10 numbers, so it will be a bit simple. And then inside the for loop we can append or add to the list. So x dot append, and we'll just append I, and let's go ahead and print the list. So let's run this, and you can see we get the list that we expected. So we have 10 numbers in the list. So now let's look at how easy and fast it is to do the same with list comprehensions. So let's create another list, and let's say y equals, and then square brackets, and then inside the square brackets n, and then for n in range of 10. So this is called as list comprehension, and you can see it is a lot similar to the regular method. In the regular method we have the for loop and then we append to the list, but in the case of list comprehension, the first thing we have is what we want to append to the list or add to the list, and then we have the for loop. So let's print the second list and run the code. And you can see we get the same list, but using list comprehension it is really easy and fast to write and understand. So list comprehensions are really similar to regular for loops, but the element that we want to add to the list is first and then the for loop. So this is what we want to append or add to the list, and this is the for loop. So now let's look at another example. So let's say instead of 10 numbers, we want 5 A's in the list. So let's first try to do it with the regular for loop. So we want 5 A's in the list, and then instead of appending I, we can append the character A. So this should append A to the list 5 times. Now let's try to do it with list comprehension. So we want to append A to the list. So instead of n, let's do A, and we'll need to change the range. So let's do that, and let's run this, and sure enough it works. We get the same output. So now let's look at a bit different example. So instead of appending A, we want to append a list of list with the number and its square. So with the regular for loop, we can just append a list and then I. So this is the number, and then comma, and then the square of that number. So I into I. So this will append the number and its square as a list inside the list. So it will be a list of list. So now let's do the same with list comprehension. So we want to append a list, and then inside the list we want the number and the square of that number. So n into n. So let's run this, and we'll get the same output. And as you can see, we get the same output. We have the number and its square. So the square of 0 is 0. The square of 2 is 4. And you can see we get that inside a list of list. So this is how you can create a list of list using list comprehension. So now instead of list, let's say we want tuples. So we can change this to round brackets, and let's run this. And now you can see we get a list of tuples. So this is how you can create a list of tuples. So similar to regular for loops, we can also use if-else statements in list comprehension. So for example, let's say we only want to print the number 4 from this list. So with the regular for loop, inside the indentation of for we can use the if statement. So if I equals 4, we'll append it to the list. So x dot append, and we'll append I. So let's see how we can do the same with list comprehension. So we are going to append n to the list. So let's change this to n, and after the for loop we can add the if statement. So if n equals 4, and let's run this, and you can see we only have 4 in the list, so it means the if condition worked. So similar to if statements, we can also use nested for loops. So inside the indentation of for, we can use another for loop. So let's say for j in range of 5, and let's do x dot append, and let's create a list of list. So I comma j. So now to do the same with list comprehension, instead of the if statement, after the first for loop we can add the second for loop. So let's say for m in range of 5, and we want to append a list of list, and we are going to append n and m. So let's run this, and you can see we get the same output. Let's add some separation so it is a bit cleaner. And let's multiply it by 20, and let's run this, and now you can see both the lists are separated and we have the same output. So this is how we can use nested for loops inside list comprehension. So this is how you're mostly going to use list comprehension, and this should cover almost everything that you need to know about list comprehension. Now similar to list comprehension, we also have dictionary comprehension. So let's clean this up. So dictionary comprehensions are really similar to list comprehension. So let's look at an example where we have the number as the key and the square of that number as the value in the dictionary. So first we'll create an empty dictionary. So let's say x equals the empty dictionary, and then we need the for loop. So for I in range, and let's say the range is 5, and then inside the for loop we can add to the dictionary, and then equals to the square of I. So this is how we can do the same with the regular method. So when I equals 1, the key will be equal to 1 and the value will be equal to the square. So let's print the dictionary, and let's run this, and as you can see we get the dictionary. We have the key and then the value. So the key is 2 and the value is the square of that number, so 4. So now let's see how we can do the same with dictionary comprehension. So let's say the dictionary is y, and then inside the curly brackets, the first thing we want is the key, and then colon, and then the value, and then we can use the for loop. So for n in range of 5, and let's print the dictionary, and let's run the code, and sure enough we get the same output. And this is how we can use dictionary comprehension to build dictionaries. So similar to list comprehension, you can also do a lot of stuff with dictionary comprehension. So that's going to be all for list and dictionary comprehension. Comprehensions are mostly used so that the code is easy to read and understand. So you can write complex code in comprehension, but it will be harder to read and understand. Anyways, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. And as always, thanks for watching, subscribe if you liked it, and see you guys until next time.